There are wounds that cut deeper into the soul than any physical pain, especially when that wound is inflicted by the person you loved and trusted the most. Until that fateful night, I firmly believed I was the happiest woman in the world. Then, the kick my husband delivered shattered not only the bone in my leg, but also my heart and my trust. But in the darkest, most desperate moment, I began to see a faint ray of light in the clear eyes of my 4-year-old daughter, Lucy. The relentless drumming of the torrential rain against the windowpane echoed the violent fury of the man standing before me. An agonizing pain, starting in my left calf, spread all the way to my crown, preventing me from even screaming. I could only curl up on the cold tile floor, biting my lips until they bled. My vision blurred and lost focus, yet the gleaming dress shoes of my husband, Jason, stopped right in front of me, were terrifyingly clear. He leaned down, grabbed my hair, and my head snapped back, unable to resist. The handsome face I had loved so much was now contorted with rage, red and horribly deformed. "How dare you talk back to me, you parasite? I only asked you for $60,000 for the business, and you can't even give me that. Will you be happy when you see me begging on the street?" Every word was a dagger plunged into my chest. Parasite. I had left my job at a good firm to dedicate myself to our daughter, Lucy, and the family, just as he had demanded. I had given him all my savings, and even the money from the sale of the apartment my adoptive parents left me when we married, all to finance his supposed business. And now, in his eyes, I was nothing more than a parasite. Holding back the tears that fought to escape, I barely managed to articulate, "I truly, truly don't have any more money, darling. I gave you every last cent I had left last month." "You're lying," Jason roared. He tightened his grip on my hair. "Didn't your adoptive parents leave you a house when they died? You sold it and kept the money behind my back, didn't you? Confess right now." "That house was the last legacy from my adoptive parents, but I had sold it 3 years ago to pay for his supposed heart surgery when he claimed he was ill." He had already forgotten, but I didn't have the strength to explain it again. The pain in my leg was consuming my entire consciousness. Instinctively, I knew something was terribly wrong. Aside from the throbbing pain, I felt nothing else in my leg. Soaked in tears and sweat, I pleaded desperately, "Please, please stop. My leg hurts so much." Jason let out a cackle, a chillingly cold smile. He released my hair, and my head hit the floor hard. "Good. Let it hurt. Maybe that will wake you up and get rid of your smart aleck attitude." He spat those cold words, walked over to the sofa, and picked up his cell phone. And then, as if he were a completely different person, he began to speak in an unbelievably sweet and affectionate voice. "Yes, my love. I got the call. I'm just sorting out a work matter. I'll come see you and our son as soon as I finish. Yes, I can't wait to see you both." Our son. I felt my heart stop. I couldn't have misheard. Who was he talking to? What son? My mind filled with confusion, and the physical pain was buried under an even greater mental shock. Just then, I heard a choked sound coming from the slightly ajar door of my daughter's bedroom, my Lucy. How long had she been there? The child was hiding behind the door, her eyes wide and tear-filled, terrified, covering her mouth with her small hands to stifle her crying. Seeing her tore my heart in two. She had seen everything. She had witnessed the entire nightmare scene. Jason must have heard her too, because he quickly hung up the phone and glared at her furiously. "Why are you crying? Stop making noise and go back to your room. Close the door." Lucy trembled from head to toe, shaking, but she didn't move. She looked at me. Her eyes were full of fear, but at the same time, they shone with an intelligence beyond her age. And at that instant, in the midst of the despair, a single spark of hope ignited. I looked at her and, suppressing the pain, subtly shook my head. Then, discreetly, I pointed my finger toward my cell phone, which lay on the side table next to the sofa. My gaze was a desperate plea. I wasn't sure if my 4-year-old daughter could grasp my intention, but Lucy was much smarter than I thought. She looked alternately at my finger and me and blinked. Then she nodded, a gesture so tiny that only I could see it. Taking advantage of the fact that Jason had turned toward the window to light a cigarette, Lucy, barefoot and silent as a kitten, crept toward the sofa. My heart hammered, almost bursting. Please, don't let him turn around, I prayed silently. When the child reached the side table, she pretended to trip, shouting "ouch" and falling forward. My phone, struck by her hand, dropped onto the thick rug. "How clumsy you are," Jason yelled without even turning around. It was time. Lucy quickly picked up the phone, but instead of putting it back on the table, she hugged it to her chest and slipped underneath the coffee table, out of Jason's sight. I saw her small, trembling hands pressing the screen. The password was her date of birth. I had taught it to her for a possible emergency. The screen lit up, and I watched her tap the contacts icon. She slid the list with her tiny finger and stopped at the name I had saved as beloved Grandpa. She brought the phone to her ear, her lips pressed tight. Her voice wouldn't come out. I knew she was terrified, but she was trying with all her might. Finally, I heard my daughter's shaky, broken voice whisper into the receiver a phrase I will never forget. "Grandpa, Grandpa, Mommy is going to die." There was silence on the other end of the line. 1 second, 2, 3, a silence that felt like an eternity settled in the tense air. I was about to despair, but then a deep, warm, and authoritative voice came through the tiny speaker. It was a whisper, but strangely crisp. "Lucy, my darling girl, you did so well. Can you tell Grandpa where you are now?" The deep, powerful voice of Grandpa Alexander on the phone was like a balm that instantly rescued me from my paralyzing terror. It was a simple question, but it carried a strange sense of security that made me realize I was no longer alone. I quickly brought my mouth closer to the phone my daughter was holding. My voice trembled, but it was much clearer than before. "Grandpa, it's Sophia. We're at..." I struggled to give the address of that modest Southside Chicago apartment Jason had secured, which had now become a hell. "Understood." Grandpa's voice showed no trace of hesitation. "Lock yourselves in a room. Lock the door securely, and don't open it for anyone, including your husband. Grandpa is on his way." The call cut off, and the screen went dark. Lucy looked at me with tear-filled eyes. She was still frightened, but a light of hope shone in her gaze. I hugged her tightly. My heart was still pounding wildly, but no longer from fear. It was from the intense conviction and anticipation that this horrible nightmare was about to end. I carried my daughter to the bathroom and quickly wiped the tear marks from her face and mine with warm water. I had to remain calm. I needed to appear strong for my daughter. I didn't know how or by what means Grandpa would arrive, but as I had always done since childhood, I trusted him unconditionally. Time passed with suffocating slowness. Sitting on the bed, hugging my daughter, I strained my ears for any sound from outside. The rain had subsided, and only the rhythmic drip of drops on the tin roof could be heard. About 20 minutes later, a strange sound came from the street entrance. It wasn't the noise of a normal car. It was the deep roar of several high-end luxury sedans entering the narrow alley. Following that were the sharp screech of brakes and the decisive sound of doors closing. My heart leaped. It was Grandpa. It had to be him. Before I could react, I heard the firm footsteps of several people approaching our doorway. They were nothing like Jason's. They were rhythmic, imposing, with an intimidating air. At that moment, the door of the apartment across the hall burst open, and the shrill voice of the landlady was heard. "What is all this racket at this hour of the night? Who are you looking for?" But her voice immediately cut off, replaced by a gasp of surprise. Curious, I peered through the peephole and was speechless at the scene unfolding. In front of the landlady was not just one person, but 4 burly men dressed in black suits with impassive expressions, like something out of a movie. And in the center of them was my grandfather. He was no longer the image of the kindly grandfather I remembered. He wore a perfectly tailored gray suit, his back straight, leaning on an ebony cane with a silver handle. His hair was completely white, but his eyes shone with a light so penetrating and authoritative that no one would dare look him directly in the eye. "Where is Sophia's apartment?" he asked. His voice wasn't loud, but its weight was such that even the normally haughty landlady trembled as she pointed toward our door. Grandpa nodded, gave a signal, and 2 of the bodyguards immediately approached our door. "Sophia, it's Grandpa. Open the door." Hearing his familiar voice, I rushed to open it. As soon as the door was open, I couldn't hold back anymore and collapsed, weeping in his arms. "Grandpa," He hugged me tightly, patting my trembling back with his warm hand. "It's all right, it's all over. Grandpa is here. No one will ever hurt you again." Just then, the sound of Jason's motorcycle was heard at the street entrance. He must have finished talking to his lover and was returning to play his role as the attentive husband. Seeing the luxury sedans blocking the street and the men in black suits in front of the door, his face went paper white. He haphazardly parked the motorcycle and rushed toward us, shouting, "What's going on? Who are you people?" Seeing me in Grandpa's arms, his confusion turned into anger and surprise. "Sophia! And who is this old man?" he yelled, pointing rudely at my grandfather. My grandfather turned slowly. His eyes, sharp as blades, cut through Jason. His gaze was so cold it seemed to freeze the air. "So, you are Jason Miller, my granddaughter's husband. And so what? Who do you think you are, breaking into someone else's house?" Jason, still not realizing who he was dealing with, maintained his aggressive stance. "Who I am is not important." Grandpa's voice was deep and grave. "What is important is what you just did to my granddaughter." As he finished speaking, Grandpa's gaze rested on my swollen leg. One of the bodyguards beside him instantly understood the signal and stepped forward. His voice was cold as ice. "Jason Miller is being detained for domestic battery and assault. You need to come with us." "What? Domestic battery? Don't talk nonsense without proof." Jason started yelling nervously. "The evidence is the injuries on my granddaughter's body," Grandpa stated, "and the emergency call from my great-granddaughter." Jason was speechless, pale as death. He looked at me, then at Lucy, who was hiding behind me. In his eyes was an expression of disbelief. He never imagined that the daughter he ignored would be the one to ruin everything. Since he couldn't articulate a word, 2 bodyguards approached and firmly held him by the arms. "What are you doing? Let go. Sophia, say something. Do you want to see your husband in jail?" he shouted, struggling desperately. I just stared at him in silence. There was not a trace of affection left in my eyes, only contempt and cold indifference. Grandpa signaled another bodyguard, who immediately handed a thick envelope of cash to the landlady. "This should be enough to cover the rent this man owes you and compensate you for the inconvenience. As of now, what happened here never happened. Understood?" The landlady, seeing the envelope, widened her eyes and nodded repeatedly. "Yes, yes, of course. I didn't see anything. I don't know anything." Everything was resolved quickly and cleanly. Grandpa turned to me, and with his warm voice, said again, "Come, little one, let's go home." Grandpa lifted Lucy into his arms. The child, feeling completely safe, hid her face in his chest. Another bodyguard helped me walk. They led me to one of the luxury sedans. Inside, a woman in a white coat was waiting. "She's the family doctor," Grandpa explained. "She'll give you first aid." The car slowly pulled away, leaving behind the modest apartment and a violent husband being led away by the authorities. I looked out the window. The Chicago night still glowed with its dazzling lights, but in my heart, a great storm had just begun. And at the end of this road, I would find not only the truth but also a family and a refuge I had never dared to dream of. The luxury sedan glided through the nocturnal city. The ride was so smooth that the movement was barely perceptible. A world of difference from the crowded buses or Jason's old motorcycle I was used to. Inside the car, the doctor gently disinfected and bandaged the wounds on my leg. Fortunately, there was no fracture but severe soft tissue damage that would require rest for some time. Lucy, exhausted by extreme fear, had fallen deeply asleep in her great-grandfather's arms. Seeing her angelic sleeping face tightened my heart again. If it hadn't been for Lucy's call, what would have become of us tonight? I looked at the man sitting beside me, whom my daughter called Grandpa. In my vague memories, the figure of Grandpa Alexander was nothing more than blurry fragments. I was abandoned at an orphanage at birth and adopted by a good middle-class couple. Although they weren't wealthy, our home was always filled with love. My adoptive father, Frank Reynolds, was an engineer at a construction company. He was a man of few words but adored his wife and daughter. My adoptive mother, Mary Reynolds, was an elementary school teacher. She was always very affectionate with me and taught me right from wrong. I loved them and was grateful to them as if they were my true parents. And in the memories of that happy childhood, a special man occasionally appeared, someone my parents always respectfully called Mr. Sterling. At the time, Alexander Sterling was the CEO of Sterling Global Holdings, SG Holdings, the conglomerate where my adoptive father worked, and his best friend. I remember he would visit our house at Christmas loaded with gifts. He had no children and was widowed young, so he held a special affection for me. He would sit me on his knee, stroke my hair, and often say, "This girl is very bright and sharp. I'm sure she'll grow up to be someone important." His gaze was always warm and affectionate. He also paid for my entire education, from grade school through university, saying that investing in education was never a bad investment. My adoptive parents initially refused, but he insisted he just wanted to do something for his beloved goddaughter. Tragedy struck during my final year of college. My adoptive parents, who were on a business trip, died in an unexpected traffic accident. My world collapsed. In my moment of greatest desperation, it was Mr. Sterling who handled all the funeral arrangements, comforting and encouraging me. "Your parents are gone, but you still have me. From now on, consider me your family." Afterward, Grandpa helped me secure a stable job at one of the group's subsidiaries. My life slowly regained stability, and the sadness gradually faded. And then I met Jason. He was a new employee in the sales department, 2 years older than me. He was tall, handsome, articulate, and always seemed ambitious. He told me about his difficult childhood and how hard he had fought to get where he was. Yearning for a place to lean on amid the pain of losing my family, I fell for his apparent sincerity and determination. We fell in love. I still vividly recall Grandpa's look the first time I introduced him to Jason. He didn't say much, he just observed him in silence. That night, he called me to his study. "Sophia," he said gravely, "that young man seems clever, but his gaze is not honest. I can't interfere in your love life, but be careful. You never know what's in a person's heart." At the time, blinded by love, I didn't heed his warning. I thought he was overly suspicious and that Jason was a good person. I even justified it by thinking perhaps his humble background made him seem a bit guarded. Alexander Sterling simply sighed and said nothing more. We married a year later. Alexander Sterling gifted me a luxurious condo on the Gold Coast and a considerable sum of money as a dowry, saying it was the savings my adoptive parents had accumulated for me. After the wedding, Jason claimed he didn't want to live off my family and wanted to start his own business. He showed me a very convincing business plan. I, trusting my husband completely, gave him all my savings and the money from the sale of the apartment Grandpa had given me, without hesitation. When Lucy was born, Jason insisted I stay home to care for the child while he handled the finances. Once again, I followed his advice, and that was the beginning of my tragedy. Jason's business never seemed to be doing well. He constantly complained about difficulties and asked for more money. I had nothing left to give him. I could only encourage him. Gradually, his attitude began to change. He became irritable and often yelled at me. Arguments grew more frequent, and finally, he started hitting me. At first, only when he was drunk, but then it became a habit. He used me as a punching bag whenever things didn't go his way. I endured it all for my daughter and the small hope that he might change. I didn't dare tell Alexander Sterling. I was afraid of worrying him and making him disappointed in my choice. I kept all the pain to myself, until this night, when everything went past the limit. The car stopped in front of an imposing, classical-style mansion with a large garden in Lake Forest, Illinois, the North Shore. It was Alexander Sterling's residence since his retirement, a place I had visited very few times. Upon entering, the silent and solemn atmosphere of the house strangely calmed me. Alexander Sterling led us to a spacious room on the second floor. "This was your adoptive mother's room," he said. "From now on, this is your home." I looked around. Everything was meticulously cared for. On the desk, a photo of my adoptive parents smiling happily remained in its place. Tears welled up again. After so many years, I had returned home. That night, for the first time in years, I was able to sleep deeply, without nightmares of violence or insults. I slept peacefully, surrounded by my family's love. and knew that starting tomorrow, a new life and a new fight would begin. And this time, I wouldn't fight alone. The next morning, I woke up as sunlight streamed through the large window, painting warm rectangles of light on the wooden floor. The pain in my leg was still throbbing, but my mind was strangely clear and sharp. Lucy was still sleeping deeply beside me. It was probably the first time she had slept soundly after so much fear. I carefully got out of bed so as not to make noise. Seeing myself in the large vanity mirror, I was startled. The woman in the mirror looked haggard. Her eyes were puffy, her face pale, and there was a faint bruise on my cheek, a memory of Jason's slap from the night before. But in the depths of that exhausted gaze, a flame of rage and determination began to burn. I couldn't keep living like this. I had to change for myself and for my daughter. I took a shower and put on the clean loungewear that one of the staff had prepared for me. When I went down to the dining room, I found a lavish breakfast set on the table. Grandpa was reading the newspaper, and next to him sat a middle-aged man with a highly intellectual appearance, wearing glasses and an impeccable suit. Seeing me descend, Grandpa smiled. His kind smile had returned to his face. "Did you rest well, granddaughter? Come, sit down and have breakfast. I'd like to introduce you to Mr. Cohen. He is my personal attorney and my most trusted friend." I inclined my head to greet Mr. Cohen. He also stood up and politely shook my hand. "Miss Reynolds, good morning. The president has already filled me in. I deeply regret what happened, but I'm glad you got out of there." During breakfast, the atmosphere was not at all heavy. Grandpa and Mr. Cohen delicately inquired about my situation, but without dwelling on the wound. They spoke of future plans, Lucy's education, and even travel destinations that might soothe my spirit. They were helping me look forward. After breakfast, we retired to Grandpa's study. The shelves, reaching the ceiling, were filled with new and antique books. The air of the room was solemn and intellectual. "Sophia," Grandpa began, his voice now serious, "this is no time for lamenting. We need to act, and quickly." Mr. Cohen continued, opening his briefcase and pulling out a stack of papers. "Miss Reynolds, following the President's instructions, we have conducted a preliminary investigation into Jason Miller's situation. The first thing we must do is immediately freeze all joint assets to prevent him from diverting funds." "Joint assets? It's impossible for anything to be left. I gave him all the money I had for his business." Mr. Cohen offered a professional smile. "Not necessarily. Legally you are still married, so we must review everything again. Furthermore, we need to trace where the money you gave him actually went." Grandpa nodded. "Exactly. That scoundrel couldn't have just failed at a business. There has to be something more behind it. Cohen, investigate all his financial movements over the last 3 years. Leave no stone unturned." "Of course, President," Mr. Cohen replied. "We've had someone monitoring him since last night. He's out on bail, and the strange thing is, he doesn't seem worried or nervous at all. In fact, just this morning, one of our men saw him at a luxury cafe with a woman." Hearing that, my heart sank. "Who is that woman?" My voice trembled slightly. "We are verifying her identity, but one thing is certain, their relationship did not appear to be that of mere acquaintances." Mr. Cohen showed me a photo taken from a distance. It wasn't very crisp, but Jason could be seen sitting very close to a woman, his hand affectionately placed on hers. "And here's the crucial part," Mr. Cohen continued. "Right after you left the apartment, he returned there. Our man overheard him talking on the phone, saying in a very irritated voice, 'The plan is messed up. That idiot isn't as simple as I thought. We'll have to find another way.' The plan, that idiot." He was clearly referring to me, us, and Grandpa. So everything that happened last night hadn't been a simple fit of rage from Jason. It was part of a plan I had no idea about. With every passing minute, everything became more complicated and terrifying. "One more thing, Miss Reynolds," Mr. Cohen said. "Legally, we have more than enough evidence to charge him with domestic battery. But to secure custody of little Lucy and make him pay a higher price, we need more evidence to prove he is an unfit father and that he has committed other illegal acts." Grandpa looked at me. His gaze was firm. "Sophia, I know this is going to be very hard for you, but you must be strong. This is your fight. Do you want to divorce, secure alimony, and leave it at that? Or do you want to go all the way, expose the true face of that man, and seek justice for the years you've suffered?" I looked at Grandpa and then at Mr. Cohen. The flame of anger and determination inside me burned fiercely. I had already lost too much. I couldn't afford to lose my daughter, and I couldn't stand the idea of the man who had destroyed my life getting away with it. "I want to go all the way." My voice no longer trembled. It was strangely firm. "I want him to pay for everything." Grandpa nodded, satisfied. "Well said, my granddaughter. Then, let's begin our plan." I remained in the study with Grandpa and Mr. Cohen throughout the day. They elaborated a detailed step-by-step plan. I, who had been a passive victim, was now part of the plan, a crucial axis in the legal and psychological war that was imminent. I knew the road would be tough, but I was no longer afraid. Now, behind me was not a cold wall of solitude, but a gigantic empire ready to protect and support me. Over the following days, I put aside my personal pain and focused on the plan outlined by Grandpa and Mr. Cohen. The Lake Forest Mansion became our headquarters. Every day, Mr. Cohen came to report on the situation and analyze new information. I, who had been a simple homemaker, began to familiarize myself with legal and financial terms I had never heard before. I avidly read the documents Mr. Cohen brought me, trying to understand every aspect of the war I was facing. Grandpa didn't participate directly in the investigation, but he set the strategic direction and used his extensive network of contacts to support us. His calm and wisdom were my emotional anchor. As the first and most crucial step, Mr. Cohen, on my behalf, filed an emergency injunction with the court to freeze all bank accounts in both our names. Simultaneously, he submitted a request to the relevant agencies to prohibit any transaction of sale or transfer of related assets. It was a preventive attack to cut off Jason's retreat and prevent him from diverting the remaining assets. As expected, this measure turned him into a cornered beast. He constantly called and texted me, at first with sweet words, pleading with me to drop the lawsuit. "Sophia, why are you doing this? Why have you frozen the accounts? I urgently need the money for a project. If you do this, you are killing me." When I didn't respond, he changed tactics and resorted to threats. "Fine, so you think you're very brave now that you have that old man protecting you. Listen to me carefully. Don't push me to the limit. If you do, neither you nor your daughter will leave unscathed." Far from frightening me, those messages only fueled my rage. I forwarded all of them to Mr. Cohen. They became compelling evidence of his violent and petty nature. Meanwhile, Mr. Cohen's team worked with astonishing efficiency. In just 3 days, they brought the first investigation results. Mr. Cohen spread a stack of papers over the large mahogany table in Grandpa's study. "President, Miss Reynolds, we have the first clue," he said, pointing to a thick bank statement. "This is the history of the transfers you, Miss Reynolds, made to Jason Miller's account over the last 3 years. The total exceeds $600,000. It's not a small amount." I looked at the figures printed on the paper and felt a pang in my chest. $600,000, all my savings, and the money from the sale of my adoptive parents' house. I had given it all to him without hesitation, and in return, I had received the bitterest betrayal. And here comes the important part. Mr. Cohen turned to another page. All this money, after entering Mr. Miller's account, was not invested in any construction project as he claimed. Instead, it was divided and moved through several accounts in a complex network, and finally, everything flowed into a single account. He circled a name on the statement. This account belongs to a legal entity called Ascendant Ventures, LLC. Ascendant Ventures. I frowned. I had never heard that name. "That's normal," Mr. Cohen said. "This company was formed about 3 years ago, coinciding with the time Mr. Miller started talking about starting a business. And the legal representative of this company is not him." He handed over another document. It was a corporate filing statement. I held my breath and looked at the administrator section. An unknown name appeared, Eliza Thorne. "Who is Eliza Thorne?" Grandpa asked in his deep, powerful voice. "She is the woman Jason Miller met with at the cafe the other day." Mr. Cohen pulled out a clearer photo. In it, a woman in her mid-20s, beautiful and sophisticated-looking, smiled affectionately alongside Jason. Everything became clear. There was no business project. Ascendant Ventures was a phantom company, a cover-up to legally appropriate my money. With my money, he had set up a company for his mistress, building an ascendant future for them. A future built upon my sacrifice and my tears. A cold rage rose within me. Not only had he emotionally deceived me, he had completely swindled me. "And where is the headquarters of this company?" I asked, my voice firm. "The registered address is in a prime office building on Michigan Avenue, but our people have gone there, and they only have a virtual office leased, almost no activity. However, we have located the apartment where this Eliza Thorne lives. It is a luxurious duplex in a high-end complex in Lincoln Park," Mr. Cohen stated. Grandpa, who had remained silent until then, spoke. A sharp glint appeared in his eyes. "Cohen, investigate this woman, Eliza Thorne, further. Her past, her relationships, everything. I want to know it all. And keep monitoring Jason's movements. I fear this is not just a case of adultery and fraud." "Yes, President." Grandpa's words sent a chill down my spine. He was right. How could a woman as young as Eliza Thorne have orchestrated an elaborate scam with Jason? There had to be someone else behind her. And was Jason, a violent and greedy man, intelligent enough to devise all this? The pieces of the puzzle were beginning to fit together, but they revealed a conspiracy and much bigger questions than I could have ever imagined. I sensed that this fight was going to be much more complex and dangerous than I thought. The waiting in the following days felt like an eternity. With each passing day, my heart burned with impatience. I worried about my own destiny, but above all, I worried about Lucy. The child was too young to understand the storm that had struck our family. She only wondered why she couldn't see her father, why her mother always seemed sad. I had to hug her and lie, telling her that Daddy had gone on a very long business trip. Every time I lied to her, I felt as if a knife were piercing my heart. While I struggled in a tangle of emotions, Mr. Cohen's team and the private detectives hired by Grandpa worked tirelessly. Like diligent bees, they collected the nectar of truth, drop by drop, in a world full of traps and lies. One afternoon, Mr. Cohen called me. His voice was more serious than usual. "Miss Reynolds, could you come to my office right now? We have some new discoveries, and I think it would be best for you to see them yourself." A bad premonition overcame me. I left Lucy with one of the staff and quickly headed to Mr. Cohen's office in the city center. His office was on the top floor of a skyscraper with a spectacular view of Chicago. But at that moment, no matter how dazzling the city was, everything seemed gray to my eyes. Mr. Cohen was already waiting for me in the conference room. Several folders and a laptop lay on the large table. "Please sit down," he said softly. "What you are about to see may be quite shocking. You need to prepare yourself." I nodded, clasping my hands in my lap. "Tell me, I can handle anything." Mr. Cohen sighed. He turned the laptop screen toward me. "We have investigated Eliza Thorne further. She is not a simple woman. Apparently, she is the director of a startup, but she actually has a quite complex past. And most importantly, she and Jason Miller have known each other for a long time." He hit the playback button. Several photos appeared on the screen. The first was of Jason and Eliza Thorne walking hand in hand on a beach in Miami. The date on the photo was about 3 years ago, only a few months after I sold my adoptive parents' house to pay for Jason's supposed heart surgery. So, the heart ailment had also been a lie, a charade to extract the last big chunk of money I had left. That money had been used to go on a trip with his mistress and start a new life. A heavy stone in my chest made breathing difficult, but that wasn't the worst. Mr. Cohen flipped through the next photos. They were from the last 2 years' moments that, by right, should have been mine and my daughter's. Jason tenderly feeding porridge to a chubby boy. Jason patiently teaching the boy to walk in a luxurious apartment. Jason, Eliza, and the child blowing out birthday candles, smiling radiantly. The image of that new family was so perfect and happy it hurt. "Who is that child?" My voice trembled uncontrollably. "He is the son of Jason Miller and Eliza Thorne." Mr. Cohen's voice also became solemn. His name is Matthew. He is over 2 years old. Jason Miller has been cheating on you and maintaining a double life. Matthew. I repeated the name in my head. Even the name of his hidden son was similar to our daughter Lucy's. His cruelty knew no bounds, so that was it. That was the true face of the devoted husband I had supported, sacrificing everything. Not only had he been unfaithful, he had a second family. He was the father of another child. The money I had saved and borrowed to give him was not for a business but to support his second family. I had become a cash cow, diligently working for the happiness of others. This truth was more painful than any beating. It was an insult, a humiliation to me and all my love. I sat motionless. Tears fell ceaselessly, but this time they were not tears of weakness. They were for my stupidity, for my youth completely swindled. Miss Reynolds, Mr. Cohen offered me a tissue. I know it's hard to accept, but we have to face this. This evidence is a death blow. With the fact that he had a child and deliberately concealed it, we can prove, beyond a doubt, that he severely violated his marital and family duties. The court, in the division of assets and in Lucy's custody, will side with you. I wiped my tears and lifted my head. My gaze had turned cold as steel. Not only will he lose custody, counselor, I said firmly, I also want him to pay for the crime of fraud and embezzlement. I want him and that woman to be socially destroyed. Mr. Cohen nodded. That is precisely the next step in our plan. He opened another folder. The company they have, Ascendant Ventures, is not just a cover-up for money laundering. They are also involved in several business and legal activities. We are currently gathering more evidence for tax evasion and commercial fraud. The net is closing, Miss Reynolds. I left the attorney's office as the city lights began to come on. I felt empty, but full of determination. All love and attachment for that man had completely disappeared. Now, only a mother ready to fight for justice, for her future and her daughters, remained inside me. I could not lose this battle. While my team and I silently and methodically closed the legal net around Jason and his mistress, they, on the other side, seemed oblivious to the coming storm, or perhaps excessive confidence clouded their vision. After several days of being unable to contact me and seeing their bank accounts frozen, Jason began to realize that the situation was not as simple as he thought. He could no longer continue to play the role of the misunderstood and victimized husband. He decided to play his last card, one he believed would soften a sentimental and loyal woman like me, his mother, my mother-in-law. One morning, while I was playing with Lucy in the garden, one of the staff members ran to inform me. Ma'am, there is an older woman at the gate saying she is your mother-in-law, and she is making a scene. My heart pounded. My mother-in-law. How long had it been since I last saw her? After the wedding, she had only come to our house a couple of times. She was a simple woman from a small town, but her love for her son was so great that she was harsh and demanding with her daughter-in-law. In her eyes, her son Jason was always the best, and all his mistakes were forgivable. I sensed her visit was not to ask how I was. Show her in, I told the employee calmly. I took Lucy in my arms, asked her to go play with her great-grandparents, and headed to the living room alone. I wanted to face her by myself. As soon as she saw me, my mother-in-law ran toward me, but not to hit me or scold me. She fell to her knees at my feet and burst into heart-wrenching tears. Oh, Sophia, my dear daughter, how can you be so cruel? Do you want to kill my Jason? I was taken aback by her sudden performance. It was a completely unexpected drama. All the house staff watched us curiously. Mother-in-law, please get up. Tell me calmly what's happening. I tried to help her up, but she flatly refused, clinging to my legs. No, I won't get up until you promise to forgive my Jason. He's my only son. If something happens to him, what will become of me? She began to plead in a pitiful voice. She claimed Jason was devastated since I left him, that he wasn't eating, wasn't sleeping, that he was only drinking, and that his business was paralyzed, that he loved me very much, and everything he had done was to give me a better life. She said he had simply lost his temper due to stress. He was wrong to hit you. I won't justify it, but after he did it, his heart broke too. Now he regrets it. You are his wife. How can you push your own husband into the abyss? You block his accounts, you report him, And you want to put him in jail? If he goes to jail, who will care for our Lucy? Who will take care of her future? Every one of her words aimed directly at my weak points: the marital bond, the child's future. She painted Jason as a responsible, remorseful husband and father, on the verge of losing everything because of a momentary mistake. Her performance was so perfect that if I hadn't had those photos and recordings, I might have fallen into the trap. But now, I could only laugh inwardly. I calmly released myself from her grasp and took a step back. I stared at the woman acting in front of me. "Mother-in-law," my voice was cold and unfamiliar. "You don't need to keep acting. That theater no longer works with me." My mother-in-law flinched and immediately stopped crying. She looked up at me from the floor. In her eyes, there was no longer sadness, but surprise and anger. "What? What are you saying? Go back and tell your son that if he is truly remorseful, he should go to court and confess everything. If he plans to continue this charade, we will see each other in court." "You!" My mother-in-law jumped up. The image of the helpless woman had disappeared. Finally, she showed her true face. "Shameless viper. It's a shame my Jason married someone like you. Do you think that because you have money and connections, you can trample on our family? You'll see, you won't get away with this." She started uttering all kinds of insults and curses I had never heard from her, but they no longer hurt me. I simply watched her in silence, as if I were watching a cheap soap opera. "Please call an employee. Escort this lady to the exit." 2 bodyguards immediately approached and escorted her out. She struggled and screamed, but she couldn't overcome the 2 burly men. "You'll regret this, you wretch. I swear I won't stand by." Her voice could still be heard even outside the gate. The house returned to calm, but a storm raged inside me. My mother-in-law's drama had failed, but it made one thing clear to me: they would not surrender. Greed and selfishness were ingrained deep in their bones. They would not hesitate to use any despicable means to achieve their ends. And I knew that after this sentimental farce, a more vicious attack would follow. I had to be prepared for everything. This fight was not just legal, it was a war of psychology and reputation. My mother-in-law's failed theater made me realize that I couldn't remain in a merely defensive posture. Waiting for them to attack and then defending myself would always place me in a passive position. It was time to transform, to present myself to them and to the world with a completely different image. I was no longer Sophia, the submissive, weak wife. I had to become Sophia Sterling, the vice president of Sterling Global Holdings, an authoritative, self-assured woman whom no one would dare underestimate. This transformation was not just to teach Jason and his family a lesson, it was about reclaiming myself, rediscovering the essence I had lost in the darkness of my hellish marriage. I started with my appearance. I stopped wearing simple, neutral-colored loungewear. Grandpa called the best stylists and designers in Chicago to the mansion. They brought the latest collections from the most exclusive luxury brands. I tried everything, from flowing silk dresses to impeccably tailored suits and dazzling evening gowns. With every change of clothes, I felt like I was becoming a different person. My long hair, which I always kept tied back in a ponytail, was transformed by expert hands into a voluminous, wavy mane, dyed an elegant and sophisticated ash brown. Makeup artists carefully worked on my face, without excess, using makeup to erase fatigue, highlight my features, and give me an air of intellectual authority. When I looked in the mirror, I barely recognized myself. The woman in the mirror was a stranger yet very familiar. It was the person I should have always been. A deep, intense, and dazzling confidence began to sprout from within. But the biggest change was not external. It was my way of thinking and acting. I started to immerse myself fully in the affairs of the group. I was no longer a mere assistant in meetings. I took the initiative to study projects, read financial reports, and understand the situation of each subsidiary. The knowledge from university that I thought was forgotten resurfaced and, combined with the bitter experiences of life, gave me a deeper and more realistic view of the business world. I began to offer my opinions and proposals in meetings. At first, there were some skeptical glances, especially among the older executives who had been serving Grandpa for years. They probably still saw me as the privileged granddaughter, but I didn't lose heart. I convinced them with numbers, logical analyses, and sharp arguments. Little by little, they began to look at me differently, with genuine respect. Grandpa observed my transformation. He didn't say much, but his eyes were full of pride. He started entrusting me with more important tasks, involving me in negotiations with key partners. "The business world is the fiercest battlefield," he told me. "It will make you stronger and tougher than any university." And he was right. Every negotiation, every professional challenge was a valuable lesson. I learned to remain calm under pressure, to read others' intentions, and to make firm and precise decisions. My confidence no longer came from Grandpa's backing, but from my own ability and effort. I was no longer intimidated by inquisitive stares, nor did I tremble when speaking in public. I had recovered my own voice. My transformation was not limited to work. I began to rebuild my social life. I attended industry parties and charity events. I presented myself with a completely new image, an elegant, beautiful, intelligent, and charismatic businesswoman. The media stopped referring to me as the victim of a notorious divorce and began to talk about the princess returning to the Sterling Empire, the new rising star of the business world. I knew all this would reach Jason's ears. I wanted him to see it. I wanted him to know that the woman he had abandoned and despised was now in a position he could never reach. I wanted him to regret it, but in a deeper sense, this transformation was for me. It was a declaration that my life could not be ruined by a pathetic man. I deserved a better life, a brighter future, and I was going to build it with my own hands. It was time for the phoenix, burned in the flames of betrayal, to rise from the ashes, more beautiful and stronger than ever. About a month after officially starting work at the group, my life had completely changed. My days were filled with work, meetings, and business trips. This activity was the best remedy to forget the pain and focus on the future. My image as vice president of Sterling Global Holdings appeared increasingly in the media. I was sure Jason and his family saw and knew all this, but strangely, they were completely silent. No calls, no messages, no scandals. That silence made me slightly uneasy. Were they plotting something? Or had they genuinely been scared and given up? Whatever it was, I couldn't let my guard down. I asked Mr. Cohen's team to continue gathering evidence and preparing for the upcoming trial. One Saturday afternoon, after a stressful week, I decided to treat myself to a relaxing afternoon. I wanted to buy some gifts for Lucy. She would soon have a school performance, and I wanted my daughter to be the prettiest of them all. I drove the white convertible sports car Grandpa had given me and headed to a luxury department store downtown. I no longer felt self-conscious or out of place as before. I walked confidently. The elegance of a lady had become my second skin. I was in a luxury children's clothing boutique, choosing a pink princess dress for Lucy, when I heard a familiar, sharp voice behind me. "Well, well, look who we have here. If it isn't the vice president? You look very well driving fancy cars and coming to places like this." I turned around, and there she was. None other than Eliza Thorne, Jason's mistress, but she wasn't alone. Clinging affectionately to her arm was Jason himself. He looked thinner and haggard, but the suit he wore was still designer. Seeing me, a hint of surprise and clumsiness crossed his eyes, but he quickly hid it behind a mask of coldness and indifference. But Eliza was different. She scrutinized me from head to toe with an envy and hostility she didn't bother to hide. Her belly was quite prominent, and she displayed it defiantly, as if wanting to show off. "What's wrong? Are you surprised? Did you think you could forbid us from coming to places like this?" "Of course," Eliza snorted. "A woman like you, who has probably only stepped into discount stores in her life, it's normal for you to be amazed." I said nothing, just offered a slight smile. I wasn't going to lower myself to argue with someone like her. My silence seemed to infuriate her even more. "Jason, look at this. Now that she's vice president, she ignores us." She leaned on Jason's arm, pouting. "Or is she still resentful because you left her? Of course. How can an old woman who can't even give you a son hold on to a man? Are you finished?" This time, I didn't stay quiet. I looked Eliza directly in the eyes and said, with a voice that wasn't loud but was cold as ice, "I don't have time to receive life lessons from a mistress like you, so would you mind stepping aside?" "What? How dare you? Who's the mistress?" Eliza's face flushed with anger. "I am Jason's fiancée and the mother of his son. You're the one who doesn't belong here." She tried to lunge at me, but Jason stopped her. "Enough, Eliza. Don't make a scene here." Jason's voice sounded tired. He looked at me with a complex expression. "Sophia, we don't have to resort to this. It's water under the bridge." "Yes, it is water under the bridge," I replied. "So, control your woman and make sure she stops barking around and bothering people." With that said, I took the dress I had chosen and headed to the checkout. On purpose, I pulled out the black card Grandpa had given me, a symbol of unlimited power. The sales assistant, seeing the card, instantly changed her attitude and curtsied. Eliza and Jason turned pale watching the scene. I knew this display was slightly childish, but it was necessary. I had to show them that the tables had completely turned. After paying, shopping bag in hand, I left the store without looking back at them. I walked past them as if they were two unimportant strangers. But when I had taken a few steps, Jason suddenly called out to me, "Sophia, wait a moment." I stopped but didn't turn around. I heard his footsteps approaching. I know I was wrong. His voice had a supplicating tone. "But please, don't ruin my life. The company is on the verge of bankruptcy. If you just said a word to your grandfather, couldn't you help me?" I slowly turned around. I looked him in the eyes, and a mocking smile played on my lips. "Ruin your life, you say? Do you remember what you and your family tried to do to me? Steal my inheritance? Take my daughter?" I interrupted him abruptly. "Compared to what you did, your company going bankrupt isn't much, but it was all I had. And my youth, my sacrifices, who compensates me for that?" I cut him off sharply. "Be satisfied that I leave it at this. Don't tempt my patience. Or the next place you go won't be the stock exchange, but prison." My words were like a bucket of cold water for Jason. He turned white as wax. He took a step back, unable to say anything. I didn't want to waste another second on him. I turned decisively and walked away, leaving him standing there, stunned, amidst the crowd. This unexpected encounter had been unpleasant, but it made one thing clear to me. Jason was afraid, very afraid. He was sinking, and I felt that the day of retrieving my daughter was not far off. The encounter at the department store confirmed that Jason was genuinely in trouble. The termination of all contracts with Sterling Global Holdings had been a death blow to Ascendant Ventures. Other investors began to withdraw their funds, and partners canceled their agreements. The ship he and Eliza had meticulously built at the cost of my money was about to sink, but a cornered beast is the most dangerous. Instead of admitting his failure, Jason decided to make one last gamble. He organized a grand party at a 5-star hotel. Officially, it was a customer appreciation event and a presentation to attract investors for an innovative new technology project. In reality, it was a desperate attempt to save his company and lure more naive investors. This information reached me through Mr. Cohen's network of contacts. Upon learning about it, a bold idea arose in my mind. Instead of just observing his performance, why not turn his stage into his final judgment? I immediately consulted with Grandpa and Mr. Cohen. "It's a golden opportunity." Mr. Cohen's eyes sparkled. Investors, partners, and the press all gathered in one place. If we expose his true face right there, the impact will be 1,000 times greater than in a cold court trial. He will be socially annihilated, with no possibility of excuse. Grandpa agreed but expressed a slight concern. "Isn't the plan too risky? What if that cornered man tries to hurt you?" "Don't worry, Grandpa," I said confidently. "I won't go alone. We will prepare everything perfectly. This will be the final act." The plan was meticulously elaborated. As a first step, through a third party, I posed as a Singapore venture capital fund interested in Jason's innovative project. I had my intermediaries promise him an investment of $40 million. For the current Jason, that amount was a lifeline fallen from the sky. He took the bait without hesitation. Euphoric, he sent all the detailed project information and the company presentation to the supposed investment fund. He had no idea that all that material was being analyzed by the experts at Sterling Global Holdings, turning into more evidence of his fraud. As a second step, I informed him that the representative of the investment fund would attend the party to officially sign the agreement. This news made Jason even more excited and confident. He spent the little money he had left preparing a lavish party to impress investors. He even invited former partners who had turned their backs on him, intending to regain his prestige. He also invited journalists from several major media outlets, hoping the event would be the platform for his spectacular comeback. He didn't know that all those guests would become the audience for his downfall. On the night of the party, the five-star hotel shone with dazzling lights. The ballroom was bustling with activity. Jason and Eliza greeted guests at the entrance with confident smiles. They looked like a powerful couple at the peak of success. Eliza wore a fitted evening gown, deliberately showing off her advanced pregnancy. She moved through the room, laughing and chatting with guests, acting as the true hostess. When the party was at its peak, the grand door of the ballroom suddenly opened. I walked in. My appearance momentarily silenced the room. All eyes were fixed on me. I wore a black evening gown, simple in design but extremely elegant. The dress, fitted to my body, and my hair pulled back in a high bun, revealed my slender neck and brilliant diamond jewelry. I wore intense makeup that highlighted my red lips and a sharp gaze. Beside me was Grandpa, and behind him Mr. Cohen and two bodyguards. The appearance of the chairman of Sterling Global Holdings surprised people even more, and the murmurs grew louder. Jason and Eliza, seeing us, had their smiles frozen. Jason's face lost all color. He hurriedly approached, stuttering, "President. Sophia, what are you doing here?" I smiled. I knew it was a smile that would chill his blood. "Can't we be here? I heard Ascendant Ventures has an important event today, and a major investor from Singapore is coming." As a businesswoman, I couldn't miss such a good learning opportunity. "But we didn't send you an invitation." "Oh, really?" I raised the golden invitation in my hand. "And what is this?" "I suppose one of your employees made a mistake." Jason was speechless. He knew I was provoking him on purpose, but in front of so many people, and especially in front of Grandpa, he couldn't do anything. He had to force a smile and guide us to the VIP table he had prepared. The party continued, but the atmosphere had completely changed. All attention was no longer on the host Jason, but on our table. People began to whisper, making all kinds of conjectures about my reappearance, a reconciliation or a public warning. The trap was set, and the stage was ready. I sat calmly, took a sip of my wine, and observed Jason's face, filled with anxiety and confusion. The best play, the final and most dramatic act, was about to begin. When the party reached its climax, Jason took the stage. He tried to regain confidence, picked up the microphone, and began his speech. He spoke of Ascendant Ventures' vision and mission, of the innovative technology project that would change the world. He painted a bright and promising future to seduce investors. In the front row, Eliza looked at him with eyes full of admiration and pride. Both were so immersed in their fantasy of a triumphant return that they didn't realize the curtain was about to fall. "And today," Jason said with an emotional voice, "we have the great honor of welcoming a major investor from Singapore. This collaboration will be the wing that allows Ascendant Ventures to fly higher and farther." Just as he was in the middle of his passionate speech, the enormous LED screen projecting the company's logo behind him suddenly went dark. A murmur went through the room. Jason, disconcerted, turned around, not understanding what was happening. He signaled the technical team, but no one responded. And then, to everyone's astonishment, the screen lit up again, but not with the Ascendant Ventures logo. The first image that appeared was a clear photo of my face, full of bruises and cuts, my eyes swollen, and my leg in a cast. The photo they had taken the morning after that fateful night. Beside it, in large, clear letters, read, "This is the true face of love." The ballroom fell into a deathly silence. The background music stopped. Everyone held their breath, their gaze fixed on the screen. Jason's face on the stage went paper white. He pointed at the screen with a trembling hand, stammering, "What is this? Turn it off! Turn it off now!" But it was too late. The screen switched to another scene. This time it was a video, a security camera recording, showing Jason grabbing my hair and kicking me in the modest apartment. The quality wasn't excellent, but his cruel and violent acts were undeniably clear. The murmurs in the ballroom turned into shouts of horror and indignation. My God, what a beast! And he seemed so normal. Eliza, sitting below, was also frozen. She looked alternately at the screen, and Jason with an expression of panic. The show wasn't over. The screen continued to display photos of Jason and Eliza together, happy family photos with their secret son, and dense bank statements that proved how my $600,000 had ended up in their company. And as a final coup de grace, an audio file was played. The sound echoed throughout the hall. It was the conversation between Jason and Eliza discussing their fraud plan, talking about how they were going to use me as a cash cow. That idiot wife is naive and trusts anyone. She's easy to fool. As soon as you ask for money, she gives it without question. Jason's voice, full of confidence and contempt, boomed through the room. When the recording ended, the ballroom erupted. The silence turned into a wave of fury. Insults and looks of contempt were directed at Jason and Eliza. Fraudster, scum, deceiver. The investors and partners who had been listening to Jason's speech moments before now looked at him like a monster. Some stood up and left. Others took out their cell phones to record. Jason stood on the stage as if struck by lightning. He trembled from head to foot. Everything had collapsed in a matter of minutes. He looked at me from above with eyes full of hatred and desperation. He knew it had all been my plan. It was then that I calmly stood up and walked onto the stage. I took a microphone from the hand of an equally stunned staff member. I looked Jason directly in the eyes and said, with a cold voice, but clear enough for everyone to hear, "Jason Miller, your performance was magnificent, but it's time to bring down the curtain." I turned toward the audience. My voice gained strength. "Ladies and gentlemen, I am Sophia Sterling, the wife of the man on this stage. What you have just seen is only a small part of the truth. Today, I am not here to lament my pain, but to unmask a professional swindler and abuser hiding behind the mask of a successful entrepreneur." I held up a stack of papers. In my hands, I have all the evidence of Ascendant Ventures scams, embezzlement, commercial fraud, and tax evasion. That innovative project he just spoke about is nothing more than a fairy tale to steal your money. "Shut up!" Jason roared like a wounded beast. He tried to lunge at me, but my 2 bodyguards stopped him. He could only struggle desperately and utter insults. Eliza, below, realizing the situation was irreversible, tried to sneak out of the party, abandoning her lover to his fate on the stage. The customer appreciation and investor pitch party had turned into the most humiliating public trial Jason could ever have imagined. Amidst the chaos of the ballroom, while Jason was still screaming, immobilized by the bodyguards, a group of uniformed police officers suddenly appeared at the entrance. Their presence silenced everyone. Leading them was a high-ranking police officer with a severe face. Accompanied by 2 agents, he quickly walked toward the stage. People instinctively moved aside. The officer stopped in front of Jason and showed him a document with an official seal. "Jason Miller, you are hereby detained for the alleged felonies of fraud, embezzlement, aggravated battery, and commercial fraud. You must accompany us to the precinct for questioning." Every word from the officer was like the final hammer blow that shattered Jason's hopes. He stopped struggling. His entire body went slack, and he stared blankly with dead eyes. He knew everything was truly over. 2 officers approached and put handcuffs on him. The metallic sound of the shackles closing echoed in the silence, like a bell announcing the end of a sinner. "No, it wasn't me. She set me up. She entrapped me," Jason unconsciously muttered, but no one was listening anymore. He was escorted out through the crowd that had once admired and cheered him, head bowed like a defeated dog. The doors of the ballroom closed, and with them, a life recently ruined. Simultaneously, another police team was arriving at Eliza Thorne's luxury apartment. She had just fled the party, and before she could recover from the shock, she encountered justice. In panic over the situation and with her advanced pregnancy, Eliza could no longer maintain her former arrogant and defiant attitude. Facing the detective's questions, she quickly broke down and confessed everything. She admitted planning the scam with Jason and that Ascendant Ventures was nothing more than a tool for money laundering. To secure a lighter sentence, she even handed over all the accounting books, documents, and other evidence she had secretly copied to protect herself. She betrayed her lover ruthlessly. The drama didn't end there. At the party, after Jason was taken away, his mother, who had attended as the future mother-in-law of the president, couldn't bear the shock. Seeing her beloved son handcuffed and her dreams of wealth vanishing like smoke, she screamed and fainted instantly. People rushed to help her and called an ambulance. She was taken away unconscious. The theater she and her son had meticulously staged ended in tragedy for their own family. Divine justice is slow, but it arrives. The perpetrator, the accomplice, and the enabler, all those who sinned, ended up receiving their just deserts. I watched all this in silence from the stage. In my heart there was no euphoria of victory, but a strange sense of peace. Justice had finally been served. Grandpa approached and placed a hand on my shoulder. "It's all over, my granddaughter." I nodded. A tear rolled down my cheek, but this time it was a tear of liberation. I had made it through the storm, and now a clear sky awaited me. Over the following days, Jason's case became the center of media attention. With irrefutable evidence and Eliza's confession, all his crimes came to light. The press dug up his past, how he had gone from an ambitious young man of humble origin to a professional swindler who took advantage of rich and naive women, a false millionaire. Society was horrified and outraged to learn his true face. I, who had been labeled the cruel wife, became overnight a symbol of a strong woman fighting for justice. The previous criticism transformed into respect and sympathy. I received countless letters and messages from unknown women telling me that my story had inspired them and given them the courage to leave toxic relationships. I knew my fight was no longer just mine. 6 months later, the trial against Jason Miller and his accomplices was held publicly in the Cook County Courthouse in Chicago. The case received exceptional attention from the public and the media. From the early morning, the surroundings of the courthouse were crowded with journalists and onlookers. I attended the trial as the victim and main witness. I no longer felt fear or anxiety. I was there to face my past and witness justice being done. I wore an elegant white suit and light makeup that showed serenity and confidence. Upon entering the courtroom, all eyes were on me. I calmly walked to the prosecution bench and sat next to Mr. Cohen. In the defendant's dock were Jason, Eliza, and Jason's mother, Barbara Miller. Their appearance was pathetic. Jason was haggard, with gray hair and sunken eyes. He dared not lift his head. Eliza, with a very prominent belly, sobbed incessantly. My ex-mother-in-law, Barbara Miller, in a wheelchair due to the aftermath of a stroke, had a twisted mouth and could barely speak. Only her gaze, directed toward me, burned with hatred. The trial began. The prosecutor read the indictment, detailing all their crimes: domestic battery, aggravated fraud, embezzlement, defamation, conspiracy. With each charge, the compelling evidence we had provided was presented: videos, audio recordings, bank statements, witness testimonies. When it was my turn to testify, I went up to the stand and, without hesitation, told my story clearly. I spoke of the years of sacrifice, the abuse, the betrayal, and his cruel conspiracy. I didn't cry. My voice was strangely calm because I was no longer a victim begging but a survivor demanding justice. When I finished, a deep silence fell over the room. I could read the compassion and indignation in the eyes of the judge, the jury, and the public. When it was Jason's turn, with his head bowed and in a low voice, he admitted all the charges. He had nothing left to deny. He only pleaded for a chance to start over, asking for clemency so he could pay his debt to the son about to be born. Eliza, crying, blamed everything on Jason, claiming she had only been seduced by him. She pleaded for a reduced sentence because of her pregnancy, but the net had been cast, and no one could escape their sins. After several days of trial, the time finally came for the verdict. The judge, an elderly man with a severe face, began to read the final sentence. This court, having examined all the evidence and testimonies, hands down the following sentence. The defendant, Jason Miller, is convicted of the felonies of aggravated battery, aggravated fraud, and defamation, sentencing him to a term of 20 years in state prison. 20 years, almost half a lifetime. That was the price Jason had to pay. Hearing the sentence, he collapsed, covering his face with his hands and trembling. The defendant, Eliza Thorne, is convicted as an accomplice to fraud, with the mitigating factor of confession and her state of gestation, sentencing her to a term of 7 years in state prison. 7 years. Her son would be born and grow up while she was incarcerated. That was the karma of a woman who had ruthlessly destroyed the happiness of another. The defendant, Barbara Miller, is convicted of the crimes of defamation and cover-up, taking into account her health condition, sentencing her to a term of 3 years of suspended prison. The judge's gavel struck hard, putting an end to the entire case. Justice had been served. I sighed in relief. I looked at Grandpa, who was sitting in the audience. He nodded at me in silence, with contained joy in his eyes. Leaving the courthouse, a crowd of camera flashes directed toward me again, but this time they were not curious questions, but words of congratulations. I did not give interviews. I simply got into the car in silence and drove away from the place that had judged my past. The battle was over, and I was the victor. The trial ended, but its aftermath lingered. Jason's family life was completely shattered. But for me and Lucy, it was the beginning of a new journey, a journey to heal our wounds and rebuild our lives. Although I had won legally, the psychological wounds, especially Lucy's, were not minor. The child, who had witnessed scenes of violence and suffered an abrupt separation, had become quiet and fearful. She often woke up at night screaming my name. Seeing her like that broke my heart. I knew that obtaining justice was only the beginning. Now, the most important thing was to help my daughter regain her smile and her innocence. I decided to temporarily set aside all my duties at the group. I wanted to dedicate all my time to Lucy. I took her to the best child psychologist in Chicago. Under the doctor's guidance, I learned to listen to her patiently, to calm her fears with love and security. Our own healing journey began. I took her on trips to places with blue seas and white sands, to majestic mountains. We built sandcastles together, flew kites, and watched sunsets. I wanted to show her that the world, besides the dark corners she had experienced, was full of beautiful things. We enrolled in art classes, painted, played the piano, and modeled clay. I wanted her to freely express her emotions through colors and notes. Gradually, I saw Lucy beginning to change. She laughed more, talked more, the nightmares diminished. She became the cheerful and adorable girl she was before, and in the process of healing her, I was healing myself. Being by her side, caring for her, and loving her, unconditionally filled the void in my soul. I stopped dwelling so much on the past. I stopped hating Jason. I understood that holding on to hatred would only hurt myself more. Forgiveness wasn't because he deserved it, but because I deserved peace. Besides caring for my daughter, I started paying more attention to myself. I joined yoga and meditation classes. Deep breathing and gentle movements helped me regain balance in my body and mind. I also started reading more books on philosophy, psychology, and the art of living. I realized there were endless interesting things in this world to explore. I stopped closing myself off. I opened up more to friendships. I met with old friends for coffee and chats. And I also made new friends in the business world. They were strong, independent women. They showed me other models of happiness. Happiness didn't necessarily have to come from a man. It could come from a career, passions, and self-ownership. One day, Grandpa called me to his study. He handed me a folder. "Sophia, these are the files for several charitable projects that the group sponsors. Take a look and choose the one that resonates most with your heart to manage yourself. I think the time has come for you to do something for society." I turned the pages. There was a project to build schools for children in rural areas, another to build social housing for families without resources. And then my gaze stopped at a project called the Haven Initiative, a support center for women and children who are victims of domestic violence. My heart leaped. This was it. This was what I wanted to do. I wanted, through my story, my experience, to help other women in similar situations. I wanted to tell them they were not alone, that after the storm, the sun always shines. The journey of healing was not just about calming the pain, but transforming that pain into strength, into a driving force with meaning, and I had found my path. 3 years. It's not a very long time, but it was enough for the pain of the deepest wounds to subside and the storm in my heart to become a serene lake. People often say that time heals everything, but I learned that time alone does nothing. Time is just a space. Filling it with healing or letting it fester depends on us, on our will and effort. I chose to fill it with hope. Lucy's life and mine had turned to a completely new page, and every word on that page was written with the ink of serenity and laughter. My little angel, who once had to witness the most horrible scene, was now a smart, self-assured second grader. The trace of fear in her eyes had completely disappeared, replaced by a clear, curious, and bright joy of living. She no longer woke up startled at night or cried at loud noises. Instead, every morning she hugged me tightly, whispered the little secrets of her childhood world, and if she fell, she would get up alone and tell me with a smile, "I'm fine, Mom." Seeing her in her white uniform, her hair neatly combed, chattering about school, I knew my decision to fight until the end had been the right one. I had not only achieved justice for myself, I had recovered my daughter's entire innocent childhood. The project I dedicated the most affection to, the Haven Initiative, had also flourished. What started as a small support center had become a solid network and a common home for hundreds of disadvantaged women and children. I was no longer just a sponsor observing from afar, but their sister, their friend, their travel companion. Every week, I spent 2 afternoons at the center, not to supervise the work, but to listen to their stories. I listened to the story of a single mother who, after 10 years of abuse, bravely escaped with her 2 children. She tells me through tears that my story, which she saw on television, gave her the strength to leave. At that moment, she tells me, "I thought, if she could do it, why couldn't I? I am also a person, and I deserve to be happy." I listened to the story of a 17-year-old girl who had to abandon her studies to be forcibly married to a rich but abusive man. She arrived at the Haven Initiative on a stormy night, with empty hands and a broken heart. Now she is returning to school, slowly fulfilling her dream of becoming a fashion designer. Every story, every fragment of life I encounter is like a mirror reflecting my own past. I see my reflection in their fear, in their pain, and in their faint hope. Helping them is my way of healing myself, and I understood once more that the best way to overcome pain is not to bury it, but to turn it into a torch that illuminates the path for others who are lost in the darkness. Sometimes, in moments of calm, I thought about Jason's family. Although I didn't look for them, news of them reached me somehow. It was said that Eliza, upon leaving prison, had discreetly left the city with her son. She went to a distant town, changed her name, and started a new life. Her son was probably the only reason she had left to live. My ex-mother-in-law, Barbara Miller, consumed by grief and illness, ended up dying alone in a nursing home. And Jason, 20 years is a long sentence. He is paying for his sins behind cold bars. I no longer feel hatred or satisfaction. The anger of yesteryear has subsided, leaving only an almost cold indifference. They wrote the end of their lives themselves. The past is past, like a flood that sweeps everything away, leaving only the sediment of oblivion. I learned to let go, not to forgive them, but to free my own soul. Under Grandpa's gradual guidance, my work at the group was no longer a burden or a challenge. It had become my passion. I proved to everyone, and most importantly, to myself, that I could stand on my own 2 feet. I was no longer just the president's granddaughter. I was Sophia Sterling, the CEO of Sterling Global Holdings, who had overcome a global economic crisis, successfully closed a multi-million-dollar deal with Japanese partners, and expanded the Sterling brand across Asia. Professional success gave me economic independence, but my greatest joy remained the simple moments with my family. One Saturday afternoon, the sky was clear and the sea breeze was fresh. Lucy, Grandpa, and I took a trip to the New England coast. Instead of a luxury resort, we rented a small house by the beach with a garden full of bougainvillea. The sunset was slowly descending, painting the sky and the sea a golden color. Lucy was building a huge sand castle with other local children. Her crystalline laughter mixed with the sound of the waves, creating a symphony of peace. Grandpa and I sat on a wooden bench, watching her in silence. Grandpa had aged a lot. His hair was silver white, but his gaze was still lucid, and his smile, as kind as ever, no longer carried the weight of a large corporate group. Now, his joy was tending the garden, reading, and playing with his only great-granddaughter. "Look at her," Grandpa said. Unconcealed happiness shone in his eyes. "She's just like her great-grandmother, always cheerful and full of energy." I smiled and leaned my head on his shoulder. A thin shoulder, but one that remained my firmest support. "Thank you, Grandpa, for always being there, for giving everything to my daughter and me." "Silly." He stroked my hair. "You earned your own happiness. You are the strongest and most resilient person I know." We sat there, 3 generations, a family united by bonds of love and sacrifice stronger than blood itself. Just then, a deep, warm voice sounded behind us. "Good afternoon, Mr. Sterling." "Sophia, I hope I'm not interrupting." I turned, and my heart involuntarily beat a little faster. It was Marcus Stone, the talented architect I had met through the Haven Initiative project. He hadn't come as a business partner but as a volunteer, dedicating his free time to repairing and designing living spaces for disadvantaged women. He was a kind, mature, and good-hearted man. He knew my past, but had never looked at me with pity or curiosity. He only looked at me with respect and admiration. "Marcus," I smiled naturally, "just taking a stroll. Care to join us?" Grandpa looked at both of us and smiled slyly. He stood up, leaning on his cane. "I'm going to see how our Lucy's castle is coming along. You two talk quietly." He walked away toward the beach, leaving us our space. Marcus sat beside me. We watched the sunset in a comfortable silence, a silence filled with peace and deep understanding. "You look different today, Sophia," Marcus suddenly said. "You're not the strong VP from the boardroom, nor the devoted Sophia from the Haven Initiative." "And how do I look?" I asked, a little curious. "You look very serene," he said with sincere eyes. "Calm, like the sea after a storm." I smiled without realizing it. No one had ever told me anything like that. By his side, I didn't need to pretend to be strong. I could just be myself, a normal woman with her wounds and weaknesses. Our eyes met, and I knew that a new, sincere, and tender love was beginning to knock on the door of my heart. I was no longer afraid of love. I understood that it is not love itself that harms us, but loving the wrong person, and I deserved to be loved. I deserved to be happy. I looked toward the horizon, where the sun had just disappeared, but the last rays of light still illuminated the sky, bright and hopeful, and I knew that tomorrow would dawn an even more radiant day. I don't know what the future holds for me, perhaps a fulfilling love, or perhaps new challenges. But for the first time in a long time, I was no longer afraid. I only knew that I was ready to receive it all with open arms. The storm was behind me, and ahead was only blue sky. Dear viewers, after accompanying our protagonist Sophia on her tumultuous journey, it's likely that complex emotions remain in our hearts. We were enraged by Jason's cruelty. We suffered watching Sophia sink into despair, and we rejoiced together when she finally rose from the ashes. This story, although fictional, leaves us with very profound and real lessons for our lives. Lessons that can be beacons and sources of strength on the uncertain journey of life. The first and perhaps most profound lesson we can draw is, never remain silent or endure in the darkness. Tolerance never brings peace. It only feeds evil so that it grows. Sophia made the mistake of enduring violence for too long. She hoped her silence would bring peace to her family, to her daughter, but reality proved the opposite. Violence, once it begins, never stops on its own. It only intensifies and becomes crueler. Lucy's trembling voice, "Grandpa, Mommy is going to die," was the costliest wake-up call. It teaches us that sometimes salvation comes not from patience, but from a small act of bravery. Never underestimate the power of asking for help. We must teach our children and ourselves that when facing injustice and violence, asking for help is not weakness, but the most powerful instinct for survival. The second lesson is about the power of change and self-worth. Sophia's life only truly changed when she decided to change. That change didn't just come from designer clothes or the vice president title. It began deep within her being, from the awareness that she deserved to be respected, that she deserved to be happy. When you know your own value, the entire world looks at you with different eyes. This story shows us that money and power are useful tools, but they are useless if not controlled by a wise mind and a firm heart. Sophia did not use money for blind revenge. She used it to acquire knowledge, seek legal support, and transform herself from a victim into the protagonist of her own struggle. That is true wealth. And perhaps the most humane and profound lesson is the way we face victory and heal wounds. Sophia could have gloated in the downfall of Jason's family and lived the rest of her life in opulence and comfort, but she didn't. She transformed her pain into compassion and her wealth into a tool to help others in the same situation. The Haven Initiative is not just a charitable project, it is a symbol of rebirth, proof that after the storm, the human being can become stronger and more compassionate. The true victory is not when the enemy falls, but when, after everything, you can stand tall, look at the past with serenity, and move toward the future with an open heart. It is a journey to transform pain into strength, personal misfortune into value for the community. I believe everyone, men and women, can find a part of themselves in this story. Perhaps you are going through some pain right now. Perhaps you feel powerless in the face of life's injustice. Remember that you are never alone. Dare to raise your voice, ask for help, and most importantly, believe in your own worth, because the brightest dawn always comes after the darkest night. What do you think of this story? Which lesson resonated most deeply with you? Share your thoughts in the comments. Your contribution can be a great encouragement and valuable advice for someone who needs it.